Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Calls. This is the 2025 Sanderson Farms Data Dive Show. We have a lot to cover for you this evening, including a first look at the weather forecast in Jackson, Mississippi for the Sanderson Farms. We're going to take a deep statistical dive into the past 5 years of play at the Country Club of Jackson, figure out which style of players have generally fared the best, figure out the players in the field this week who fit that mold. I'll show you some of the research that I looked at earlier today. Didn't feel comfortable posting anything to social media, but I'll still show you some of that. So we have a lot to cover. Let's get into it. All statistics provided tonight and every night are from FantasyNational.com. It is the best golf analytic tool out there for your money. Go check out FantasyNational.com. You will not regret it. In the description to the video, there are links to all the social media. First off, my X and Instagram, where, as I just alluded to, normally I post research every Monday regarding the PGA Tour. Didn't do anything for the Sanderson Farms. I didn't feel confident and comfortable with the very, very little consistency that the Sanderson Farms champions have the past few years. But normally, if you want to see the weekly research that I do on the PGA Tour, give me a follow at your preferred social media site. X is also where I place my weekly betting cards and top player usage in the DFS contest I play. That comes out every Wednesday after the DFS Tactics show. So if you want to see the players I'm using most often in my lineups, players I've wagered my money on, go give me a follow over at X. Lastly, for social media, Gabe's handle's in the description. He writes a great article called The Fringe. He is taking the fall off to work on some enhancements to the Fringe. But if you are following him over on social media, you would have seen our Ryder Cup picks challenge, our exhibition as we started the 2025 picks challenge throughout the year. Had a little fun, did something for the Ryder Cup. I ended up prevailing 4-3 in that challenge, so thankful for that. But it was a lot of fun with Gabe to do that with him. So you really are missing out on a lot of great information and a lot of fun if you're not following him and subscribe to his articles, so make sure you're doing both of those. And lastly, for this intro, we're live. Chat's open. Want to hear from you all. You know, any lasting or final thought about the Ryder Cup, feel free to jump in and chat with that. And then moving forward for the Sanderson Farms, who's your favorite? Have you made any wagers? How do you think the course is going to play? Anything and everything Sanderson Farms and the Country Club of Jackson. Make sure you put your thoughts and opinions in the chat. If you're not able to catch the show live, put your thoughts and opinions into the comments. I'll always get to those as well. So let's get into it. Let's dig into the weeds of the data for the 2025 Sanderson Farms. And normally we start over at the Windfinder extended forecast. However, as I promised, if the GCSAA brought out the tournament fact sheet for this year's Sanderson Farms, we would look into it. Apologies, I got to get camera centered and wipe off my glasses. Basically, get my life in order is how I'm going to phrase that. So we're going to go ahead and start with a very, very quick review of this year's Sanderson Farms GCSAA tournament fact sheet, considering we had to use last year's. I will tell you that nothing has changed, so we're going to run through this fairly quickly. This is a John Fott and Mike Gogol design. I'm not familiar with any other PGA courses that that these two are a part of, or course architect. So nothing to do with architect and Fantasy National. This is a long course, but maybe not necessarily the longest in terms of by par. It is over 7,400 yards at 7,461, but it is a par 72, 4 par 3s, 4 par 5s. And as we looked last night in Fantasy National, they have not played this over 7,400 yards for a few years now, about 4 or 5. Last time being in 2019. So even though on the scorecard it can stretch to 7,400 yards, they have not apparently used maximum yardage over the years. We are on Champion Bermuda, and there are 3 courses, including the Country Club of Jackson, that have champion Bermuda specifically. That is Sedgefield, host of the Wyndham in Greensboro, and TPC Southwind, host of the St. Jude in Memphis. So these southeastern courses, if you will, or at least some of them, champion Bermuda. Bermuda and Rye in the rough. Fairways are pure Bermuda. Greens a little bit larger than the average tour green at 6,200. Depending on the number that you see, average tour size green is anywhere between 5,500 and 6,000. Not a whole lot of fairway, but the fairways, aren't necessarily mandatory here. The rough is kept pretty darn short. So fairway, not necessarily the biggest deal here, but there's a whole lot of rough on the property because there are technically 3 9-hole courses that make up the Country Club of Jackson proper property, I guess. They just use this Dogwood and Azalea 9 to make the championship. 5 holes with water in play. No new notes for the championship course from last year. The only thing being the range and the short game. This year the range and short games, whatever that means, were renovated. Next year the collars and approaches will be regressed. So nothing has changed from last year's GCSAA tournament fact sheet. So again, quick overview. Nothing to do with Architect Filter. This is John Fott, Mike Gogol design. Fairly long course, but will not play all that long, especially since this time of year in the South, it's generally dry. It's generally really firm. 7,400 yard course. Champion Bermuda greens that are usually lightning fast. Lightning, at least per Fantasy National. So there's a look at this year's GCSAA tournament fact sheet. Now we'll move to what our normal start is on a Monday night, taking our first look at the Wind Finder extended forecast. And Thursday looks, fairly calm, fairly decent for golf. Highs in the upper 80s, not a whole lot of wind. But the rest of the tournament looks like players could be dealing with some very gusty winds. Maybe not consistent, as you see the sustained mile-an-hour speeds don't reach the double digits or very low double digits in the case of Saturday. But we're dealing with apparently some gusty winds. Into the mid-20s at points. And then Sunday there does look to be rain in the forecast, and a lot of rain, 0.3 of an inch around 4 p.m. A lot of rain on Sunday. We'll have to see how the forecast progresses throughout the week. We'll take another look at the forecast Wednesday night for the DFS Tactics show. See if this rain, is either moved up in, time frame, or maybe it leaves. But as far as for the cut portion of the tournament, does look like we're not having to deal with any rain. We'll have to see what the wind looks like come Wednesday. There's a look at your first look, if you will, at the forecast for the Country Club of Jackson and the Sanderson Farms this week. We'll move to Fantasy National. There's been one field change today. William Mao has decided not to play. He is withdrawn. And Joseph Bramlett has taken his spot in the field. So just be aware of that in case you had planned on making lineups early this week. Sorry, it's really bothering me that my camera will not center. William Mao has withdrawn. Joseph Bramlett has taken his place. Okay, first thing we're going to do, and I'm not terribly confident about this, especially since, when the wind has picked up to moderate. We have seen the Country Club of Jackson play average in terms of difficulty. But what you won't see is difficult by any means. So we'll go ahead and keep the easy relative to par filter going for the week. I'm a little bit less confident in that than I was last night, considering the forecast with some gusty winds and whatnot. However, in 2025, this calendar year, your top performers in the field this week for the Sanderson Farms when rounds have been easy relative to par: Akshay Bhatia, Isaiah Salinda, Aaron Wise, Tom Kim, Eric Van Rooyen, Cameron Champ, Kevin Roy, Sam Stevens, Kevin Yu, our defending champion, and Andrew Putnam. Now, this was earlier today, admittedly, but I do think there's a lot of value potentially this week, especially in the odds market, the outright market, as your favorite. And again, this might have changed. I looked, last around lunch today, but Akshay Bhatia was your tournament favorite at 20-1. That's very, very rare that you get the tournament favorite at 20-1. So I do think there is a lot of value to be had, and that's why we're going to take, as we always do, but we're going to take a pretty strong analytical look at the Country Club of Jackson this week, figure out where that value is potentially in the outright market. So there's a look at your top easy relative to par players. Normally, I would use this over 7,400 filter, since that is the technical length of the course. But as I mentioned during the GCSAA tournament fact sheet, they haven't stretched this course out in the last few years. So I'm much more inclined to look at that filter. So instead, let's go ahead and go to Microsoft Excel and take a look at the Country Club of Jackson in terms of a statistical profile, figure out the style of players that generally have played best over the past 5 years. Again, I only go back 5 years because so many things change on the PGA Tour. Players change caddies, players gain different skill sets or potentially lose skill sets, courses change, all of that. So I only go back 5 years. But in the past 5 years, you can see that putting has really been the name of the game at the Sanderson Farms. And it's been fairly consistent with the exception of this 2022 low outlier. With that said, the approach has also been fairly consistent as well. You had a couple of down years, but mostly hovering in this 2.4 range, which is slightly, and I mean the slightest bit less than the average full field PGA Tour course. You also see that off the tee, roughly the same on the other side of the coin. It's slightly more important than the average full field course, with one extremely low outlier. So, really, if you took that away, that's going to rise, a decent amount, go all the way up to 11%. So we're going to want to look at off the tee. We're definitely not going to ignore the approach. What has been pretty stable, with the exception of the one extremely high outlier in 2021, is that around the green isn't really that much of a factor around the Country Club of Jackson. So we're not going to be focused too much or at all, on around the green. Apologies, let me get something off of my desk here, and you hear the crash. Around the green, not really all that important. We're going to be focused on these three shot types: off the tee, approach, and putting. Now, it is a little surprising to see that off the tee isn't more of a factor when we look at distance and fairways, both of them being fairly considerably more important than the average full field course. Almost 40% for distance, 33% for fairways. Again, it's a little surprising to see off the tee only 5%. Having said that, when you take a look at the actual detail, you really have two big years in terms of distance here at Country Club of Jackson. The rest has been, either very, very low or kind of at average. That makes me think distance isn't as much of a factor as I thought initially last night. It certainly isn't going to hurt. You take a look at some of your past champions, Luke List, Kevin Yu, Sam Burns. These guys do move it off the tee. But you've also had players like Mackenzie Hughes win here, who is not long by any means. So not absolutely mandatory to have distance off the tee. It certainly can help. I've been more surprised at how consistent the fairways gained has been today. So, and it's not necessarily just, like the good drives either, because these greens are pretty darn easy to hit. Most of your players are hitting them, which means it turns into a slight bit of a putting contest. But I have been surprised at how much the fairways have been consistent and how much higher they've been over the average full field course. So perhaps we're going to want to take a look at fairways gained. I'm still not in love with that idea. I think I'm just going to have some added emphasis in off the tee in general. Granted, off the tee generally favors length over accuracy. Got a few things to think about as we move forward, tonight during the show and into the week as we start trying to figure out which players we're going to want to look and focus on. What isn't debatable around the Country Club of Jackson, this is clearly a favor to the birdies gained as opposed to the bogey avoidance. More than a shot and 3/10, 1.3. And we can see that here as well. 25% more important in birdies gained. Bogeys avoided are basically at average. But it's clear that you're going to have to go low. You're going to have to give yourself plenty of opportunities. You're going to have to make quite a few putts, but you're going to have to be pouring in a lot of, or putting up a lot of scores under par to contend here, considering the average winning score is about 20 under. Sometimes it gets up, I believe Kevin Yu last year was 23. With the wind, maybe we're looking at more of an upper teen, 17, 18, 19 winner. But generally 20 under is kind of what you're looking at. Eagles are not very common around here. In fact, they were slightly negative last year and in Mackenzie Hughes' win. So we'll look at birdies are better. Eagles do happen. They're just not as prevalent as you might think for a course that is deemed pretty easy and with 4 par 5s and a drivable par 4. It's just surprising not to see more eagles. We will look at birdies are better, but most of that's just going to be in the birdies gained. Moving into some of the meat and the potatoes and the raw data here. Par 3s, pretty darn even in terms of importance across the various lengths. If we look at par 3s in general, they don't really provide a whole lot, 10% less than the average full field course. So to me, this kind of signifies that we might be able to ignore par 3s. Just as a reminder, on the scorecard at least, we have 1 at this range, 1 at this range, and 2 that fall between 200 and 225. But you see, every year they play a par 3 long and they play a par 3 short. So they move pins and tees around enough that if we do anything in terms of par 3s, it'll be 5%. Now, if we remove this low outlier from last year, how does that change things? Slightly over. So they didn't have a much of a factor last year at all, as you can see. I don't know. We'll probably won't do much with that tonight. I might end up putting 5% in the final mixed condition model come Wednesday. Par 4s, Again, fairly even though what's quite interesting, I'll bring us back to Fantasy National just very, very quickly. On the scorecard, you have a 505. Whoa, why is that not loaded? There we go. You have a 505 par 4 on the scorecard on the 18th. Now, again, this is probably its max length, would be my guess, because they haven't played any par 4 over 500 yards in the past 5 years. So we're more so looking at the 400 to 450, but even so, 1.8 out of a 4.3 is, roughly 40%. Not all that important, really. We're going to be looking at par 4s because they do matter here. About 1.5% more. I wouldn't worry about this number. Not every course has a drivable par 4, and that's what this is. There is one drivable par 4 here. But I would say at most maybe 5% in this length of par 4, since 6 of the 10 par 4s at the Country Club of Jackson fall to this range. But we're not going to put a whole lot in par 4s, I don't think. Because if you look here, par 5s, it's really all in this range here. 3 of the 4 par 5s fall between 550 and 600. Yes, they do lengthen some and shorten some, but for the most part, you're really focused on this range of par 5s. And a 1.28 on just this length of par 5 is about the same, exactly the same, as all of the par 3s in the past 5 years. So the par 5s are going to carry more weight than usual, would be my assumption, especially total par 5s being 17%, but all of that, as you can see, is coming into this range, just 550 to 600. So we'll have a pretty high focus in this range of par 5s. We look at proximities. Now, in Fantasy National, it was the 100 to 150 and maybe the 200 plus that we were focused on last night based on against PGA Tour averages. Look at how little this range has mattered for a lot of the top performers over the past 5 years. It's actually been the 75 to 100, which I'm not really in love with, although it does make some sense when we have such a plethora of 400 to 450 par 4s. But the 200 plus, and that makes a whole lot of sense when you have all 4 par 5s attackable in 2. You have a couple of longer par 4s that could mandate a 200 plus approach from some of the shorter hitters. Probably looking at 200 plus. If we look at any specific range of proximity at all, and we see the raw numbers here, just big numbers here, and the rest of this is pretty small. As you saw, they are all negative in terms of against the full field course averages. So there's a look at the deep statistical dive, the raw data, the past 5 years at the Sanderson Farms and the Country Club of Jackson. So now, with that knowledge in mind, we'll head back to Fantasy National, figure out the players in the field this week who seem to fit this criteria that we went through and found in Microsoft Excel. We're going to start with off the tee. I'm just going to keep it pretty darn simple. Last 36 rounds, I'm not going to use any filter for this. Your top off the tee players, the last 36 rounds, so long as it's been this calendar year. Your top off the tee players: Kevin Yu, Cameron Champ, Rico Hoey, Nicholas Norgard, Jesper Svensson, Isaiah Salinda, Pearson Cootie, Davis Thompson, Alex Smalley, and Thomas Rosenmiller. Thor Bjornsson just outside your top 10 with very good ball striking Stephen Fisk, very good ball striking numbers. Rico Hoey, Davis Thompson. Combining this off the tee and approach. Kevin Yu, Cameron Champ, honorable mentions considering their irons are lagging just slightly behind the off the tee. But, again, the emphasis on like Davis Thompson being top 25 in both. Rosenmiller, Thorbjornsen, pretty darn solid in both. Fisk, pretty darn solid in both. Luke Clanton, top 20 in both. Emiliano Grillo, top 20 in both. Doug Gim, just outside the top 20 in both. So, solid performance in the ball striking for both of those. But there's your top 10 in terms of off the tee. We switch to approach. Your top approach players in the field this week: Batia, Lee Hodges, Sammy Valimaki, Ben Coles, Keith Mitchell, Nikolai Højgaard, Mac Meisner, Henrik Norlander, Victor Paris, and John Pack. We looked at the off the tee. Some other notables here, if we were focused on the approach side of it, like Lee Hodges is fine. Probably worth an honorable mention. Keith Mitchell, 5th with the irons, 31st and off the tee. 31st is good, not elite for this field. So, again, solid. Nikolai Højgaard, solid. We talked about Grillo being top 20 in both. Hoey, we talked about when we were on the off the tee. Kevin Roy, sure. Fisk, Davis Thompson. So there's a look at some of your top ball strikers. Top 10 off the tee, top 10 approach. Putting, we're going to look at a couple of different ways here. We looked at this last night, but as a quick review, we're going to look at some Lightning Bermuda, considering these greens have been considered Lightning the past 4-5 years or so. So your top putters on Lightning Bermuda greens. And I'm going to have to expand this time frame. I apologize. 2024 and 2023. Make it so that these players have enough rounds to make it statistically significant. Your top putters on Lightning Bermuda greens: Taylor Montgomery, Lonto Griffin, Bo Hostler, Hayden Springer, Michael Thorbjornsen, Sam Ryder, Aaron Wise, Minwoo Lee, Christian Bezuidenhout, Andrew Putnam, and Brandt Snedeker. Your top 11 here. Just so that you can see that it does change, speed does matter, we're going to remove this Lightning speed filter. Now, there's a lot more rounds of data here, but if we take out the Lightning, let's see how that changes the top 10 when we factor in just Bermuda. Taylor Montgomery, Andrew Putnam, now Mackenzie Hughes rises, Bridgman, Ryder, Bezuidenhout, Wise, Chad Ramey, Kuchar, and Bo Hostler. So you have a few of the same names, but definitely a lot of difference here. Hughes rises, Bridgman rises, Sam Ryder rises. Whereas I'm just going to look at Hughes and Bridgman because I can remember them off the top of my head. Like Hughes and Bridgman. Bridgman doesn't fall too far, 15th in terms of performance on, specifically Lightning Bermuda. But Hughes, who was top 5 in Bermuda, falls to 30th when you're factoring in the Lightning. So that's why I like using the speed filter if it's consistent. And we've had very consistent data here at the Sanderson Farms for quite a while. Second way I'm going to look at this, we're going to look at this spike percentage. The players, we'll go with 2. The players that spike the most often on Lightning Bermuda greens, meaning the percentage of rounds that they gain 2 strokes or more. So with that in mind, your top performers on Lightning Bermuda greens, you've got Michael Thorbjornsen, 5 of his 8 rounds. He's gained 2 or more. He putt very, very well for 2 rounds at the Wyndham. And then in last year's Sanderson Farms, he putt extremely well. In fact, I feel like he finished pretty high. Yeah, top 10 gained 6. His irons weren't great last year, but evidence of, spike putting. Trying to find some other names here with rounds that are enough to make it statistically significant. Taylor Montgomery, 6 of his 20 rounds, he is spiked on Lightning Bermuda. Bo Hostler, almost 30%. Adam Svensson, winner at the RSM, which those aren't champion Bermuda, but those greens can get pretty darn fast down at Seaside, at Sea Island. Winner at the RSM 2 or 3 years ago now. He spikes once every tournament, seemingly, on Lightning Bermuda. Mac Meisner, Kevin Yu, who spiked a lot last year. There's Sam Ryder, Peter Malnati. Hughes, winner of this event 3 years ago, 20%. So there's a look at some of your top spike putters on Lightning Bermuda. And you can argue, the number here, whether that's 2, whether that's 1, whether that's 3. I just go with 2. That means they're really rolling it for that round. Last way we're going to look at putting, we're going to take a look at these specific courses that have champion Bermuda. And again, this is going to be a very, very small sample size, but if you are a big stickler about the exact green surface, being or wanting to look at performance on the exact green surface, this champion Bermuda, we'll look at Sedgefield, the host of the Wyndham. We're looking at TPC Southwind, host of the FedEx St. Jude playoff event. And then, of course, I went all the way past it. We're going to look at the Country Club of Jackson. We're going to go back. Holy smokes. Let's just clear that out. All right. We're going to start with these years. I'm hoping this is enough. We might have to add 2022. We're going to look at the Country Club of Jackson, Sedgefield, TPC Southwind. To apply those course filters, probably not a whole lot around. There's a few here. Okay, on champion Bermuda greens, specifically, your top putters: Lonto Griffin, Taylor Montgomery, Mackenzie Hughes, Mac Meisner, Jacob Bridgman, Michael Thorbjornsen, Brant Snedeker, Hayden Springer, Bo Hostler, Max McGreevy. There's your top 10 in terms of putting on specifically champion Bermuda. So there's a good look at some of the high-level strokes gain data. We'll move now to fairways, greens, distance. We'll still look at distance because it can help, but I am not as confident that it's going to be the biggest factor like I thought it was going to be last night. So your top distance players in the field this week: Nicholas Norgard, Jesper Svensson, Thorbjornsen, Højgaard, Trevor Cohn, Nikolai Højgaard, Minwoo Lee, Isaiah Salinda, Matty Schmid, and Stephen Fisk. You see a couple players here like Thorbjornsen, excellent distance and fairways. Salinda, excellent with distance and fairways. Cameron Champ, Luke List to a little bit lesser of an extent. Yeah, so there you go. There's some. There's 4 names that are going to be very, very elite in this mixed condition model in terms of the driving, with the distance and with the fairways. Your top fairways gain players: Paul Peterson, Emiliano Grillo, Takumi Kanaya, Putnam, Snedeker, Zach Johnson, Rico Hoey, David Ford, Joel Damon, Ben Coles. But I'm not as sold on the fairways because somebody like Andrew Putnam, somebody like Emiliano Grillo, they have not performed well here. Like Putnam, one of the bottom 15 or so in terms of performance at the Sanderson Farms. Off the tee is just not his game. Kind of struggled here. Who were a couple of others around here? Putnam, Snedeker, a little bit older. Grillo, maybe we could take a look at. Joel Damon, I don't think has had a lot of success here. Damon, not too bad actually. A couple of top 15s. Grillo has had quite a bit of success. So, as I was saying, distance isn't the be-all, end-all. I mean, Grillo is actually 6th in terms of total strokes gained. Granted, he's played all 5 years, so that'll help. Damon a little bit lower down here. But, yeah, a little bit to think about in terms of how much we want to factor in distance versus fairways, just versus, just kind of off the tee in general. What is not debatable, as I have said, we're going to look at scoring. I will use the easy relative to par filter just to try to keep things uniform. Looking at a scoring metric with a scoring filter is generally my preferred method of looking at things. So we're going to start with opportunities. Your top opportunities gained players when rounds have been easy relative to par: Ricky Castillo, Joel Damon, Eric Van Rooyen, Michael Thorbjornsen again, Akshay Bhatia, Kevin Velo, Chan Kim, Davis Thompson, Adam Schenk, and Rico Hoey are your top 10 in terms of opportunities. In combination with that, players like Van Rooyen, Thorbjornsen, Bhatia, Thompson, Schenk to a little bit lesser of an extent. These guys have been converting with these birdies or better, being in the top 20 or so. But your top birdies or better gained players when rounds have been easy: Kevin Yu, Akshay Bhatia, Cameron Champ, Michael Thorbjornsen, Hayden Springer, Nicholas Norgard, Sami Valimaki, Jesper Svensson, Eric Van Rooyen, Kevin Roy. So we'll have a lot in these two metrics come Wednesday night in the mixed condition model. I am going to skip par threes. I don't feel confident right now that they're going to contribute a whole lot in terms of what we want to look at. So we're going to jump to par fours. We're mostly thinking this 400 to 450 range, but I'll sort on just total par fours. Noah Goodwin, Kevin Roy, Matt Wallace, Hubbard, Seabez, Fishburne, Victor Perry, Doug Gims, Sami Valimaki, Akshay Bhatia. Really the only three here that maybe drop a little bit in case we put 5% in this 400 to 450. Seabez still top 20 in this field, but not 5th total when we're just looking at this range. Doug Gim would drop. Sami Valimaki would drop just a little bit. Good on all par fours, but maybe not to the extent if we were to focus on this range only. Conversely, if we were to look at this range only, some new names that might pop up: Aaron Wise, 4th in this range, but only 18th total. Davis Riley, Trey Mullinex, Rasmus Højgaard, playing this range of par fours well, but maybe not necessarily, all par fours well. So there's a few names for par fours. We're going to look at par fives, absolutely. I also realized that I meant to look at proximity and didn't, so we'll definitely do that. For the par fives, definitely going to look at 550 to 600. Nikolai Højgaard, Gordon Sargent, Thorbjorn Olesen, Davis Riley, Hayden Springer, Pearson Coody, Will Gordon, Victor Perry, Max McGreevy, and Quade Cummins. Really emphasize those 10 right there, as those are the top 10 in the specific length of par 5 that is prevalent here at Sanderson Farms in the Country Club of Jackson, and those par 5s contribute a lot of success. We'll finalize this Fantasy National portion with proximity. I meant to do this earlier and just forgot. So, again, we're going to focus on the 200 plus. This is in combination with the par 5s, being attacked in 2. You do have a couple of longer par 4s. Your top 200 plus approach players: Damon, Thorbjornsen, Batia, Will Gordon, Adam Schenk, Joseph Brantlett, Matty Schmid, Thorbjorn Olesen, Rasmus Højgaard, and Antoine Rosner are your top 10 on proximity from 200 plus yards away. Okay, I'll bring us back to strokes gained in case there is something that we want to take a look at, but we'll move to the early look file for the Sanderson Farms. This is performance at the Country Club of Jackson the past 5 years. So you see somebody like Henrik Norlander, who has 3 top 5s, 2, somewhat middling finishes, if you will. But he's played very well at the Sanderson Farms. Has played very well. Teller Montgomery only played 1 time. Springer 1 time. Thorbjornsen, top 10 last year. Jaeger, very, very consistent here. Nothing worse than a T30, but nothing better than, I think, a T23 or something. He's just been very consistent. So we're going to take a look at performance at the Country Club of Jackson the past 5 years. We're going to start with off the tee. Players who have been very good off the tee at this course. You've got Cameron Champ, who is 1 for 2. Several players who have only played it once. Matty Schmid, although leaving a lot to be desired in terms of success. He has been ball striking it well. He just hadn't putt well here. Davis Thompson, 3 for 3. Bo Hostler, 3 for 3. Luke List, a former champion, has actually been acceptable on these greens. Mullinex, Gary Higo, defending champion Kevin Yu. Norlander. Aaron Wise, 2 for 2. Rogers has really driven the ball well here, but only made the cut once. Svensson. Surprisingly, Svensson's one of the better Bermuda putters, but has not putt well here. It's interesting to note. There's your top off the tee players. Only at the Country Club of Jackson. Strokes gained approach. Oops, I almost did around the green. We don't want that. Top approach players. Again, Dunlap, Van Rooyen, only 1 time. Tom Hoagie, to be expected. Doing it all in the irons. Pretty poor everywhere else. Cole has been okay. He's been very good with the irons. Okay overall. Hubbard, much the same. Neesmith, much the same. Seabez has done, a lot of Seabez things. He's not very good off the tee. More known for his short game, but he's hit his irons well here. There's Griot, who's putt very well, or, pretty darn well here. Lee Hodges. There's Norlander again. Schmid, Doug Gim, doing Doug Gim things. Hitting irons well, not putting worth a damn. Hughes doing Mackenzie Hughes things. Very good with the short game. The irons have been good. Not much off the tee. Lauer. Snedeker's actually been okay around here past 5 years. Thompson, 3 for 3. Any player highlighted in orange, which Brantlett is now in the field, so I need to unhighlight that, if you will. But any player highlighted in orange is an alternate. Putting. Name of the game, generally, around the Country Club of Jackson. Top putters at the Country Club of Jackson the past 5 years. You can see there. A lot of players who have only played it once. Lonto Griffin, 1 for 2. But look at that. Norlander, not normally a good putter, has been dynamic on these greens. Garrick Higo's been very good on these greens. Hughes, not as much of a surprise because he's generally a pretty darn good putter. Stefan Jaeger has putt well here. Kevin Yu, not a very good putter, has putt well here. Seamus Power. Smalley, not a good putter, has putt well here. A little bit more down here. Carson Young, Seabez, Trey Mullinex, etc. Okay. I will look at distance just because I'm interested to see where some of these former champions have been. Excuse me. In terms of distance around here compared to their peers. Like there's Luke List, 4th in terms of distance, former champion. Kevin Yu, 16th or so. Okay. Like Mackenzie Hughes is who I'm, pretty interested in because he's not a big hitter. Slightly more than field average acceptable. So, these top distance players like Cameron Champ's been okay. Luke List has been good. Schmidt has not been good. Bramlett's been okay. 4 for 4 in terms of making the cut, but nothing ecstatic in terms of finish. Whereas if we look at the players who have lacked a lot of distance, like Andrew Putnam, the lowest in terms of distance, but he's still 2 for 3. Snedeker, 3 for 4. He's actually been fairly good here. Seabez has been decent here. Hubbard's been decent here. So distance isn't, again, distance doesn't seem mandatory. It certainly can help, but just interested to see that. Because there's not a whole lot of Eagles, we'll just look at birdies. Birdies gained. Again, Ventura, Garrick Higo leading the way of players who have played it more than once. Kevin Yu. Ben Martin, 1 for 2. Seamus Power, Mackenzie Hughes. There's Norlander again. Schmid just hasn't avoided bogeys. But he's popped on a few of these things like distance. Off the tee. I don't forget what his putting was like. Yeah, pretty poor. But he's actually ball struck it well. Matty Schmidt might be, a decent little upside play maybe. It's quite kind of interesting at least. Mark Hubbard, good with birdies. Smalley, Yeager. Okay, skipping the par 3s. I'm actually going to skip the par 4s as well. We'll just do par 5s. Do 200 plus, and then I'll go into the research. Top par 5 performers at the Country Club of Jackson the past 5 years. Smalley, of those who have played it more than once, he's been very good on par 5s here. Norlander, Higo, Yeager, Mackenzie Hughes, Hodges, Davis Thompson, Luke List a little bit further down here. Van Rooyen only once. Taylor Moore, 3 for 3. Average finish inside the top 30. He's been pretty good around the Country Club Jackson. Interesting. I'll finish this part off with 200 plus procs, then I'll go into the research. 200 plus procs. Top performers. Again, Christopher Ventura, only one time. Cameron Champ, Hayden Buckley, Eric Cole, Bramlett, Putnam, Taylor Moore, Hubbard, Zach Johnson, Seamus Power, Seabez, Tom Hoagie, Armour. Interesting not to see Henrik Norlander up here in terms of performance with 200 plus. Like Fishburne's was really bad his one time. Where is Norlander? There's Luke List. He hasn't been good for 200 plus around here, but a former champion. Norlander hadn't necessarily been good 200 plus. He's been good at the 2 ranges that at least Fantasy National thought would be important. So, okay. But total procs isn't that much. All right, interesting to take a look and see how these players have fared at specifically that course this week, the Country Club of Jackson. We'll finish off the show tonight with the research that I would have posted had I felt comfortable with finding any patterns or consistencies. I just didn't. We're going to start with the winner matrix. How these past champions have performed at the Country Club of Jackson before their win. So you see Kevin Yu, defending champion, he missed the cut the year prior. but he did finish top 20 in his first year. Luke List, a lot of the same. He did make the cut the year before winning, but was very poor, but did have a top 20 and a runner-up, more historically. Mackenzie Hughes didn't have a lot of experience here, but 35th and then win. Burns was solid here, but he did miss the cut the year prior. And then you get into where the data gets very, very weird and wonky. Sergio in 2020. Now, 2020 was, an outlier of a year in general, but he had never played Sanderson Farms. Champ, never played the Sanderson Farms. Wins. Gribble, Malnati, Nick Taylor. If guys have played the Sanderson Farms, it looks like you would want them to have had at least some kind of modicum of success. I know Mackenzie Hughes doesn't technically fall into this, but like Kevin Yu, Luke List, if you stretch it just a little bit, Mackenzie Hughes, Sam Burns, the past 4 winners have all had, I'm going to say, a top 25 finish. I understand that's 26th. Just leave me be. I'm going to round it to a nice round number. The last 4 champions have all had a prior top 25 at the Sanderson Farms. But I wouldn't exclude anybody who has never played here, because you see a lot of first-time winners. Granted, that's a little, more historical, but still, they have played, somewhat well here recently. In terms of, sorry, I just realized I copied an incorrect row. Let me take care of that real quick. That goes here, which means that goes there. Nope. Whoop. Apologies. I had the wrong row for Luke List. I copied his Sanderson Farms row as opposed to the year prior. Okay, let's take a look at how these players have performed in their most recent event. A couple of players, actually, most of your champions, especially historically, had played in the fall before winning. Luke List played the Fortinet. Mackenzie Hughes played the Fortinet. And then, pre-2020, almost every single one of these players played in the fall before winning the Sanderson Farms. Now, Kevin Yu did not play the Fortinet, but won the Sanderson Farms. 2021's winner is Sam Burns. Didn't play the Fortinet, but you can kind of forgive that because he was, well, I don't think he was at Whistling Straits. So, yeah, I don't know. That's weird. Burns didn't play the Fortinet. So a little bit of, again, some just inconsistent data there. You look at performance in terms of specific metrics, like there isn't a lot of consistency off the tee. Kevin Yu wasn't great in his prior performance. Mackenzie Hughes wasn't great in his prior performance. And then wins at the Sanderson Farms. The approach is kind of everywhere. A couple guys were hideous with their irons the tournament before winning the Sanderson Farms. Even putting, just very, very hit and miss. And that was the way it was across all of these metrics. Just, it seemed like no real consistency among them all. Maybe par threes, but how much do they really matter? So I didn't feel comfortable with a whole lot here in terms of past champion data. If we take a look at their recent form, and I'm just going to be fully transparent, I'm still trying to figure out why I have these tournaments specifically highlighted. RBC Heritage, Canadian, Byron Nelson, Memorial, Travelers. Those courses don't seem like they have a whole lot in common, but clearly I did something. Oh, that's what it was. All of these players, and I will highlight that row. All of these players had a top 20 since June 1st. Kevin Yu at the John Deere, Luke List at the Memorial, a couple of top 25s for Mackenzie Hughes, Sam Burns, Sergio. It wasn't a whole lot to go on. Granted, I'll concede that to you as the viewer. Not a whole lot to go on, but I believe that is why I've got these rows highlighted, is that they at least had a top 20. They had been in contention at some point in the not so distant past. But even so, like Kevin Yu last year was not in form with his off the tee, not in form with the irons, not a good putter in general. Comes in and wins. Luke List, generally pretty darn good off the tee, but Mackenzie Hughes is not and wins, and he wasn't even good that week when he won. So my whole spiel here is that I did not feel comfortable trying to put these patterns or see these patterns and put them on social media. There wasn't a whole lot to go on in terms of consistency from prior winners. But that's what I have for you all in terms of a Data Dive show. I want to thank everyone for tuning in, watching, listening, supporting the channel by liking the videos, commenting, and subscribing. I always appreciate it. Love what I do. Taking a very in-depth look at golf statistics, giving you a statistician and data analyst view of what he sees, trying to help us all win a little bit of money in the process. Reminder, I'll be live Wednesday night for the DFS Tactics show for the Sanderson Farms. So for all the wagers you've made so far this week for the Sanderson Farms, for all the wagers you're thinking about making this week for the Sanderson Farms, and until I see you Wednesday night for the DFS Tactics show, may all your bets be profitable.